So, one of the big questions that Jennifer and I are continuously asked is how do you engage your clients? How do you do this very intricate personal work, relational work with families of wealth and influence? And we've already talked some on the podcast segments about some of the tools we use: personality profiles, love languages, the whole intake process of getting to know the client. And now we're going to hit the first meeting. And the reason why this stuff is so important is it relates to every single one of us in relationship with another breathing human being. And that is, how do you build trust when you know over time you're going to get into some pretty deep relational information on individuals and on an entire family? And building trust, building that high trust culture, as we call it, is the most important thing. And so the question, we all ask then is, how do you do that? How do you do that in everyday life? But in Jennifer and I's case, how do you do it with your clients? And I think what's been important is actually our intake process. We've already gotten to know who they are. We've spent time with them before we show up for the first time. And we talk with all the family members before we bring everybody together. So we're in relationship with the entire family before we meet in person for the first time, because we've met through Zoom or by phone or exchanging texts, all the different communication modalities you can think of. But how do you then make sure that the family knows who's in the room? In other words, the assumption is that the family already knows each other. And so as we move into our first in-person meeting with our client families, we actually assume that they do not know each other. And we walk through personality profiles, we walk through love languages, we walk through key questions about priorities and values. And I think what's so important for all of us to hear is, if you're not in communication with somebody and you're not asking them questions about who they are, what they enjoy, what they're interested in, it doesn't take, and I'm talking about in the family context, and obviously it translates to friendships too. It doesn't take but a couple years of being married, having your own children, moving away from your hometown, to where you really don't know your family members anymore. Because it takes a ton of intentionality to stay connected in the culture we live in. So just the fact that we reconnect the family to each other is such a huge value proposition for our clients. And for us, it allows us to sit back and watch the pixie dust at work, watch the relationships connect, ask leading questions that the whole group has to answer. And then you ask at the end, we always ask the question, which is, how many of you in the room knew everything that was just shared by the different family members? And no hands go up. And people might say, well, I knew this part, this part, this part. But the fact of the matter is, they don't really know who is in the room. And I think our challenge then, even to the Garcia family, is, do we know our own family? To you, do you really know what's going on in your family today? And so one of the, just repeating and recapping, is one of the big things we do in our very first in-person meeting is we reconnect the family. And we do that a lot of different ways. But then the challenge back to all of us, including the Garcia family, is, how are you staying connected to your family? How are you staying connected to your friends? By the way, how are you staying connected to your coworkers? It's a real ripple effect. Typically, if you're not connected in one place, you're usually not real connected in another. So again, just the idea that we spend time, like hours, reconnecting recon- we spend time, often hours, in our first in-person meeting, reconnecting the family to each other. Big value proposition.